Welcome back, everybody. So today we're going to be looking at the flour sack exercise. Now the flour sack is kind of like taking the bouncing ball to the next level. We're going to give it a lot more personality. It also has a different sort of weight to it. So to start, let's open up Action Script 3, always. Let's click on the stage with our selection tool, or move tool, I forget what they call it, selection tool V. Just so we can ensure that we're accessing the properties for the stage. Let's change this to 720 by 480. Our standard for rough animation. Okay, so to kind of just talk about the bouncing ball, or not the bouncing ball, the flour sack a little bit. So you remember when drawing human beings? Well, that's going to come in handy here, okay? Because the flour sack is essentially these two masses at play here. So to simplify, this is kind of what it looks like. But the principle of the bean is the same. There's a stretch side and there's a pinch side. So keep that in mind when you're drawing your flour sack. Also, the majority of the weight of the sack is here on the bottom. Because remember, gravity is pulling down on all the flour inside. So some people, let's talk about expressions a little bit. So really exaggerate your expressions. Sometimes having a midline down the center can really help, especially if your character's doing like a twist, right? So that can help. So when you're doing expressions, a lot of people like to use these as like little hands, and they can go flappy flap. Some people like to view them as ears, so kind of combine the two ideas. So if your flour sack is alert, it's maybe leaning forward a little bit, right? And its little ear hands are up. If your flour sack is feeling kind of lazy, it's probably going to be slouched in the front like a person would, and its ears might be a little bit lower, right? If your flour sack is real sad, it's probably going to be bent over itself, right? And it's going to be drooping, right? We can even exaggerate that a little bit more. Okay, so why don't you just take a minute here and just draw a bunch of little flour sacks doing different things, just to get a feel for it. And if you're having trouble kind of drawing this just right off the bat, remember you can draw two little circles inside like the human being, one smaller, one bigger. And that can really help to just kind of figure out where things are going to be weighted. So go ahead, just try to get like a bunch of different emotions. So like angry, might be leaning forward, right? Or like attentive. Like if it really wants something, maybe it's leaning and reaching for what it wants. Or maybe it's really proud. Right? Maybe it's kind of agitated here. Maybe it's showing off how strong it is. Have these little floppy things come in together. Right. So this is the basis of the flour sack. So again, when you're starting off, take a minute just to draw all these things. It can be really handy just to get a feel for the character. So I'm going to select everything and delete it to start. So I'm going to name this arc just like we did with the bouncing ball. I'm going to change my color to something a little less dark. Okay, and so the goal of this is to get your character not only to jump and hop its way, because remember, it doesn't have legs. It doesn't have the capability of walking, and walk cycles are their own thing. But it can hop, right? So maybe character hops in, does a big jump, maybe does a backflip, right? Oops. Maybe it does a backflip, right? and then it hops away. That could be something, and this is just kind of a guide for us. It's not a be-all, end-all when you're drawing arcs. You do want to kind of follow the general pattern of an arc though. Okay, so I'm going to have mine do that. You can have them just jump up and down in the middle, maybe spin around, do a twist, touch their toes. But they do have to hop, and they do have to get from one side of the screen to the other. Doesn't matter what side you're starting on, up to you. I personally like to work left to right because that's kind of how people read in Western society, right? Okay, and this is going to be flour sack rough. Okay, I'm going to change my color yet again. I'm going to go for like a soft pink. I'm going to go back to my brush tool, which is B, make sure my pressure sensitivity and my tilt is on. That's really important so you can get thick and thin lines. All right. I'm also going to make sure my smoothing is not very high. What happens when you have really high smoothing is that when you make a quick arc, or you're trying to move around, it does this weird sort of thinning. That actually doesn't look too shabby. Sometimes when it's really high though, it gets really difficult to work with and it starts messing up and makes things a little bit more square. So to start, when you're just animating rough, keep it pretty low. Keep it around like 13. And then when you're doing like a cleanup pass, you can take it up to like 40. But again, for this, just do that. All right, so I'm actually going to start with my character in the middle here. He's hopping. He's going to land. Okay. Getting ahead of myself. I was just going to kind of draw a guide, but let's see. I'm going to come out a little ways. I can clean up the timing here in a sec. Let me come over here. Extend that arc. So I'm going to keyframe. So whenever he's at like the top of an arc, or the bottom, I'm going to have him doing his little jumpy bit. Actually, I'm going to come back over here. His ears need to be down. It's going to land. He's going to do a little bounce when he first gets to this spot before settling in just to stand. I'm going to have him turn and look up. So the audience's eyes are going to follow him or her looking up. Put this over a little bit. I'm going to have them still looking up because they're looking in the direction they want to go. They're going to do a little rear wiggle. They're going to spring up. I'm drawing that center line because that's kind of important to know where the heck everything is going to go. There's where they're doing their flip. Right. Turn onion skin for this. So here's the head. Here's the feet. So they just done the flip. One sec. Okay, so this is the head here. So I'm gonna have the body flip around. Right, an H there. The head. Now they're gonna fall straight. Oh, I gotta autosave. Really stretch him here. Keep that nice arc in the body. Strong landing. Again, kind of leaping up. Again. Before settling. Looking this way now. Okay, anticipation. They've got to bend down before she can hop again. Landing, and that's it. So to preview this, let's take a look at the really rough animation now. So I can kind of figure out where things need more time. So I think in here, that settles fine, but I think she needs a little bit more time in here. So I'm going to extend by hitting F5. It's actually an extra keyframe. We're going to clear that keyframe. She looks... I think she needs some time to keep looking before she decides to wriggle her butt. And then go up. I also think she needs time after she settles here to kind of chill. Okay. So let's preview this. It almost looks like she's looping, huh? So if you find yourself lost at any point, like she gets bigger here at the end too, but if you find yourself getting lost at any point, don't be afraid to look up reference. Reference is absolutely invaluable. So if you don't know, if you want someone to if you want your flower sack to do a twist, you don't know how to do a flip, you don't know what that looks like, that's okay. It's okay not to know. What's not okay is not using reference when you need it. So go find a clip or a GIF, watch it a bunch of times, really get a feel for that movement. There we go. Now she's not magically growing. Yeah, I like that timing. So from here, what you're going to do is you're going to go back and do something called breakdowns. And breakdowns are kind of like the main in-between. So here are all my keyframes. So the main in-between is going to fall right about in the middle, right? Let's go ahead and hit F6 and turn on your onion skin. Drag it so you can see either of the keyframes on either side. Hit delete and then draw what would be in between. So we know she's following this arc here. And she's going to stretch a little bit. Her feet are headed towards where they're going to end up, right? And her ears might be flying back because she's traveling forward, right? Let's come over here to the breakdown over here. I'm going to hit delete. I'm going to stretch this to see what the next one is. Okay, so here she'd probably be leaning forward again. This foot would have just left. She's kind of hopping. Her ears might be back again. Same thing over here. She might be reaching for where that foot's about to land. Ears behind her. Same thing here. She just leapt up. She's traveling towards this space. One foot is leaving. One's headed towards where it's going to go. Maybe one foot just touched, the other is about to. Delete. Maybe this is where her feet are just about to touch. So this is on that bounce. Drag this over a little bit. You can see what a difference that already makes, right? Okay, so here is a little tricky. I wouldn't necessarily draw a breakdown quite right in the middle. And can you guess why that is? It's because she's pausing here, and I want that pause. So I'm gonna come over here, further down than in between, and this is where I'm gonna put my breakdown. So she has that pause there. I might even drag it over a couple other frames, because this isn't a big motion. Okay, turn my onion skin back on, hit delete. Oops, I gotta select it. Delete. Okay, so she's starting to twist. So that means this ear is moving a little bit. She's not fully twisted, but she will be in a second. It would help if I have this here. Right, so you can see how that would be animated in there. Okay, and she looks up for a minute. So same thing here. My breakdown isn't going to be right in the middle here because I need that space for her to hold. Okay. Delete. Drag this over one. So now she's turning back around. And she's starting to bend over. And here, I'll go ahead and put it in the middle in this one, just because she's going to be wriggling her tush for a little while. Yeah, actually she's going to be taking off that's going to be a pretty fast movement. It's only going to be a few frames, so yeah, I'm going to move this down a little bit actually. I'm really going to stretch her here, exaggerate that stretch. And it might look silly in a single frame, but this frame's going to go by so fast that no one's going to know. Okay, let's do a breakdown here. Okay, so, oops, forgot to delete. So here's where her head's starting to tilt back behind her. Get a stronger arc in there. Over here. Okay, so she's gonna be, her head's more or less in the same space, but now her body has kind of flipped upright. And then it's gonna flip this way. Oops, gotta save for auto recovery. And I'm gonna make this come up a little bit more. Again, exaggerate the stretch. Might look silly on this one frame, but it'll make sense when everything's in motion. Much like the bouncing ball here, this breakdown is going to be her more or less touching the very tips of the floor before she squashes down. And avoid twinning. That means making everything perfectly symmetrical. So in this case, I'm having her lead with one side. So there's a side here that's favored. Okay, so I'm going to move down a little bit. Okay, she's going to hold here again. So my next breakdown is going to be further down. Okay, so let's preview this now. You'll see a pretty strong difference. So you have some pretty good movement, right? So if you don't have time for all the in-betweens, definitely get to the point in the project where you have a breakdown, because that's going to really change how your animation is viewed by an audience. Because when you have the breakdowns, you at least have enough to have that squash and stretch, that sense of weight and gravity, right? So I would recommend, even if you're just hopping across the stage, you're not having your stylist act do anything, add in some pauses. Have them look around, tilt their head, stomp their foot. Have a pause somewhere in there or multiple places just to play around with weight and timing and personality. Because flower sacks have a lot of personality. Okay, so this would be the stage where you would go through and you'd actually in between them. And sometimes this can get a little bit confusing. I'm going to do a little bit to start, just so you can kind of get a sense of it. But if you're just paying attention to how weight is distributed, it becomes a lot easier. So look at the individual parts, like this leg is now in between where this was and this was. This leg is now in between where this one and this was. Right? So if you think of your flower sack in parts, not just in, you know, as a whole, It makes it a lot easier to in between. Okay, so let's just take a look at this first part here. You can see what a difference in-betweens make and how smooth that looks, right? And here I'm about every other frame. So this is about on twos. And that's perfectly ample for what we're doing. So when you guys are working on this, really try and aim to have everything on twos or about on twos. And you can add stuff on ones where you think it needs a little bit more work, like this last bounce here. Where she's kind of settling in, that would be something I would probably do on ones just for that little section, just to get that movement really solid. Okay, and then she needs a frame here to lead into here, so be aware of that. She's not just going to suddenly twist like that. It's a little sudden, so you might want to come in here a little bit of a second frame. Stick that midline right in between them. The ears right in between. Right? And now if we scrub through, that looks a little better, right? And then of course we need another in between here. See how much better that looks? Maybe even like an extra one here would be really nice, just right in between here. If you want to keep it on twos, you can just add a couple extra blank frames. Yeah, see, that's a lot better. And again, you need a couple here leading into here, so on and so forth. So that's all I'm going to do as far as a walkthrough goes. If you have specific questions about how something moves, before you ask me, what I want you to do is I want you to try and act out that movement. Stand up, move your body, even if you're not doing an actual flip, kind of just stand there and move your arms and legs around and kind of careful not to, you know, run into a wall or like kick something or someone, but get the movement going, because I want you guys to have this sense of connection between animated movement and real movement, because it's all based on reality. It's based on real kinetics. So really do that and then research it. If you don't know how to do a flip, go look at some GIFs. Go through them, look at a video on YouTube, go through them frame by frame. And you can do that on YouTube. Pause the video by clicking on it, and then use the comma key and the period key, and you can go through that animation or video frame by frame and really get to study the movement. You can look at other animated pieces that may have a flip or something that you want to do, and you can go through that frame by frame and really get an understanding of how things are timed and when certain body parts move. And you can translate that into anything, including a flour sack. So if after you've tried acting it out and looking up reference and you're still really confused, then I'll come over. But I want you guys to have a chance to really grasp what's happening on your own. So I want you guys to have that light bulb moment of where something clicks in your own head and your understanding clicks. So that way you learn what's happening and you really walk away with a deep understanding of the motion. So that's it for this particular lecture. I hope you guys have fun with the flour sack. I personally really enjoy the flour sack, and I'll be sure to show my first flour sack in class. So good luck, and I can't wait to see what you create.